Hey there, how you doing? Chad McMillan with McMillan Strategies, here to discuss financing your company today. I've been through a number of multi-million-dollar financings, including a company I ran as president, CEO, and director for over $2.5 million we raised on an exciting venture with a huge distribution and diversity of shareholders that participated. So I've seen a number of different transactions succeed, and I've seen a number of different transactions fail, and there's a number of reasons I find why they do or they don't make it. Let's get right into it with some tips for you and some questions I'd like you to ask yourself, and I ask myself as it relates to financing companies, when and where we do. First question you need to ask, and I ask myself, am I ready? Are you ready? Do you have your materials in place? Is your business plan ready to go? Are your legal documents prepared? Your subscription agreements? Do you have all the fundamentals you need? If I were to show up today and said, here's a check for $1 million, but we have to close this today, would you be ready to close? That's the question. Next question, do you know your worth? I've had people approach me on opportunities and say, hey, this is $1 billion valuation on this company. It just isn't. There's no justification for it. These same people are flashing one piece of paper in front of my face saying, because of X, Y, Z, this is what this should be worth. Look, if it's justifiable, you can see it. It makes logical, rational sense that a company should be valued in that respect. But if it doesn't have any sort of justification for the valuation, i.e. your project, let alone anyone else's project, then how can you go and ask for some financing at that sort of valuation? Very simple. We talk about valuations all the time. This sector is overvalued, this company is overvalued. Is it overvalued or not? When we deal with public companies especially, certainly private, but the public company barometer is easier to track, because in the public market, in an auction market, it's the bid-ask wrestling with itself, whether people think a company is undervalued or overvalued every day. So when it comes to startups, either public or private startups, you're trying to justify that valuation. What's the best way to do it? A credible third-party independent valuation of your company. Ideally a group that specializes in your area, that understands the technical parameters of what you're doing, and the metrics that would be relevant to evaluating the worth of your company. For instance, in the mining business, there are mining consulting firms that specifically evaluate mining projects right down to the fine-tooth comb of the projects, and can justify beyond what I would at least suggest is a reasonable doubt. There's nothing perfect about these valuations, but they're about as good as you can get if you're using the best of the best credible businesses of the world to determine what a project is worth in the ground, what type of metal or materials are there, and how much that would be worth, which you can then take back to potential financiers to justify your company valuation and negotiate acceptable terms for those financiers to provide capital, to invest capital in your venture. So do you know your worth? I'm sure you're a believer. You need to be. But are your beliefs just right out the window as it pertains or as it compares to your peers or your sector or your own business? Independent valuation is the best way to go. Do you know your targets? The next question you need to ask yourself, who would finance you? If you're a tech company, are you marketing to resource investors? If you're a resource investor, are you marketing to tech investors? If you are a resource company, are you marketing to a tech company? Within technology, are you, as an example, to drill a little deeper, are you targeting, and I use targeting loosely, right? this is important too, so I'll bring this up. When you're bringing investors into your company, when you're looking at soliciting investment, you need to really consider these potential partners as partners, these investors as partners, because they'll be with you for a while on your journey. You want to make sure, I would suggest to you, that they're good people, that they come from good pedigree, that they're experienced, that they'll help, they can add additional value, and that you'll get along with them over the long run. Because eventually, you can't guarantee that, of course, but eventually, when things come push to shove, maybe a second round of financing, or if something doesn't go perfectly right with the company, are these guys going to look to squeeze you out? Are they going to look to take over the company? Are they going to look to bully you into, tougher terms, we'll say? Or are they going to be there to double down and back you up and help make some adjustments, maybe a pivot, and keep your company rocking and growing? So key things. So know your targets. Bringing it back to the question, who are those that fit that mold? I mean, let's look at it. Within each sector, there are investors and let's say accredited investors, angels, funds, ultra-high net worths, family offices that hit different thresholds of investment. So some love to play in that seed range, that early stage startup. Some love private ventures. Some love public ventures because they have greater access to liquidity, among other reasons. Some like growth stage, some like cash flow positive companies. There's a whole basket. So really drill in, my recommendation, really drill in to who you're looking to finance your company. There are a lot of sector agnostic groups out there as well, generalists. So you can really create a matrix, just lay out the grid and say, here's these groups, these guys are sector agnostic, these guys are in my, in my wheelhouse of my sector, these guys are in the wheelhouse of the size of my company, these guys are in my jurisdiction, so on and so forth. Another tip as it relates to knowing your targets, do you have any connections to these groups? A warm intro is always better than a cold one. We're blessed in many respects with open social connections, LinkedIn and the like, where people can be connected already through mutual networks, or have testimonials from people we know, or what have you. If you know the groups already, it's way better, it's way easier to get in the door. If possible, also if you're in the financing businesses, or if you're sourcing financing, is another trick. Ask when you don't need the money, which means just get a feel for the group. Introduce yourself just casually. There's no rush. There's no press. There's no full court press. It's just start building a relationship with the group. And then when you're ready to raise capital, then you start walking it around, and you've taken that whole, let's get to know each other and feel each other out for a long time element out of the equation. Everybody feels good already, knowing the path that each other have been on, and you can start building it up that way. Let's leave it at that. Do you know your targets? So there's a good overview of that question. Do you have anyone with experience in your group or your team that's ever raised capital before? It's important because that's going to help. That's going to help you avoid, getting taken for a ride, because it happens. You need to watch out for the financing terms. Look, if it's convertible or some sort of secured debt structure, you've got to look at these very closely to see what the conditions are. If you can service the debt, if you're going to be taken for some sort of a long-term, takeover control styled structure where somebody's going to show up in 6 to 12 months and own your future. Equity terms, how do you establish equity terms? How do you market equity terms? How are you structuring that in relation to your corporate valuation? And how are you pricing the financing in relation to that valuation? Different for public and private companies. Surely, privately, There's quite a system that works, in the private sphere about financing private companies. It's much easier to establish a valuation. It's much easier to establish a premium valuation on step-up financings if you're not worried about the liquidity of the market, which is prevalent in public companies, matching those levels. There are countless examples of really promising ventures companies, stocks we'll say, that are in the public domain and grossly undervalued because their corporate awareness or promotional efforts aren't able to keep step with the valuation that the company really deserves. And that's where, just as an aside, there is a service for investor relations, promotions and market awareness, sometimes abused, but at its most fundamental level, there for that purpose, to help companies realize their fair market valuation, which then allows them to raise capital at those levels as opposed to heavy discounts that could be excessively dilutive and eventually put huge pressure on the principles of the company and well, you never know, just steer the company in a potentially detrimental direction, for sure. So to have somebody in the team or around the team that you trust or that that has some experience actually closing financings, whatever platform or method you're using or looking to use, really important, I would suggest, to be working with somebody who knows how to do that, knows how to structure that, can point to experience in doing that in the past, and position you for your financing activity, for your financing strategy, to align you for success. Next point, a bonus, I guess. Are you in the right space? Okay. Kudos. I love this line my father's always said. If everyone wants a brown suit, then don't show up with a blue suit. It's just simple, right? It's just a great line. One of the most effective ways to finance companies or finance projects is being in the sector that everyone is looking to participate in. They're hot sectors, we call them, obviously. They're wound up. They're easier to sell for a financier, or they're easier to justify for an investment banker, an institution, like a fund manager, an ultra-high net worth, maybe excited about the potential. Family offices, same thing. These are opportunities to benefit from that updraft. Now let's be clear on a few things. That's what we call hot money. It's filled with good people. There's no doubt about it. It's also filled with those that you got to be careful of, that are just looking to make a quick buck. And it doesn't mean you won't be subject to the same due diligence just because you're in a particular sector. Let's look at marijuana, hot public and private market sector. I would suggest to you with substantial growth ahead of it, so a lot of money, interested in investing in the sector and pouring in. But that alone doesn't mean that any company with a marijuana leaf on it or a marijuana keyword in its name is going to obtain that financing. Everybody's still going to look at your business model, still see if this makes any sense, where the growth is, or the potential growth is, and whether that warrants investment or not. So it helps to be in that space that will open doors for you. I don't mean just marijuana, but I mean a sector that is trending for growth and that has a limited number of participants participating in it at present. Being positioned in a space like that will greatly help your chances of financing your company. Doesn't guarantee you anything. You still need to have your nuts and bolts put together, but I'm telling you right now, it'll make your life easier. Next question, do you know how much cash you'll need? So you're a startup company, you are laying out your game plan, and you're thinking, man, it'd be great if this angel showed up and helped out our deal. I think or this celebrity or whoever. It'd be amazing if George Clooney invested in this because XYZ, all this, amazing endorsement we would receive and attention we'd receive. But George Clooney will say, shows up to meet with you and offer you a check for X. Okay, so how much do you want from George? George is like, well, here, my check's blank, so what am I filling in? And you say, well, George, we'll take all of the money you want to give us. Wow, you want to give us $10 million, $20 million. Man, you're such a great guy. We're going to just do awesome things with this, I promise. We're going to have so much fun. I mean, let's be honest, that's not how it rolls, right? You need to sit here and you need to say, this is our use of proceeds. We're going to take X number of dollars and we're going to deploy it into Y number of initiatives, uses, needs, and we expect to derive Z result from that use of proceeds, okay? Which will, then I'll just say, turn into A, the letter A will turn into A result for the company itself, right? So, money comes in, X amount of dollars come in, which will give us, or which will be used for Y, Y, which will generate Z result, Z, which will create what type of uplift in the valuation of the company, okay? So, reverse engineer that. What do you want the company to achieve? Well, we want to grow from a company that is worth $10 million to $100 million. Sounds great. How do you plan on getting there? Well, if we were going to do this, 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 and this, we think this would grow our sales by X, Y, and Z, and if we grew our sales by X, Y, and Z, then that will translate into so on and so forth. Cool. So now what do you need to grow your sales by that? Well, so on and so forth. We've laid this out. What does that cost to do that? Well, that costs $10 million. Okay, sounds good. Who's our ideal financier to back us on this? Well, man, if we had George Clooney and his endorsement and his investment, I think this thing would be a no-brainer. Adds credibility to our product. Everybody feels good. This thing will sell like crazy. We'll get all this additional exposure. Assuming there's that value of George Clooney. Our example would participate with you in that particularly, but let's say he does, and he's the Cadillac, and it all works out. Then George says, how much am I putting in? And you say, George, 10 million, this is what we're looking for, this is how this works, bada bing, bada boom, as they say, and this is what we're going to do with it, and this is why you're going to win, and away you go. Okay, so how much do you need? You need to know the answer to that. I've said that in there. What is the money being used for? One more trick to financing your company, and I got a couple bonus caveats here for you. Well, not caveats, so to speak, but a couple bonus tips for you. The big thing: why now? Why should anyone invest in your company now? And most people have a hard time triggering this emotion. I highly, highly recommend, and this has been very, very successful for me in my journey, is positioning your company where the needle is moving away from the moment. That is, you are excited about what's happening, so is everybody around everything you're doing, and it's attracting capital to you. Okay, this is the big kahuna. You don't need to be looking for capital if you're doing things exceptionally well. Capital is calling you, saying, do you need any money? We'd love to be a part of this. We'd love to invest. I mean, this is the sweet spot of financing, is if you don't have to go market for it. If you are, what you're trying to do is create a circumstance where, through your awareness, through your marketing program of your company, for your financing, that you're creating this true or auric experience of a scarcity around the offering. Now, that doesn't mean you get into this, no disrespect to car salesmen, but this type of car salesman analogy, this like, buy now, hurry, this sale's gone forever. But to some degree, you're trying to create that without again, no disrespect, but some form of sleazy type of factor associated with it. We all know the stuff, so I'm not trying to disrespect any other professionals. I'm just saying, a scarce product makes people and motivates people to move faster. A lot of things have countdown clocks and the like. When you look at crowdfunding platforms, they're running on countdowns. Why is that? Well, that is supposed to create an impetus for you to get it before it's gone. So look, in a public company, one example would be a hot stock, so to speak, where the company valuation is increasing during your financing, and every day that your financing price is at a steeper and steeper discount than your current market. That means somebody just wants to buy the retail paper, the retail stock, that they are going to be paying a higher premium for it, and if they'd like the financing, well, the financing keeps looking more and more attractive because every day it's greater and greater, a greater and greater discount from the actual market valuation of the company, right? So then you're creating this trajectory, and that will move people into your story faster. So if your private company, as an example, is scaling, if you have X number of new users a day, or you're generating X number of sales a day, and this seems to be growing exponentially to the point where possibly your capital needs are diminishing, or the appeal of or the likelihood, let's say, of success or realization of your deployment of capital, or the success of the deployment of capital to achieve growth in the company, because let's just be honest, what I'm describing is that it's already occurring. It will drive financial parties to make a more aggressive offer. It will drive financial parties to compete for the opportunity to invest in your company, either alone or in what they call a syndicate. If you're unfamiliar with the term, it means a group of parties that participate in an investment together. And it's this type of energy that you really want to create. So that's how you really get this stuff done. And there's a number of different tricks and tactics to do it. I'll save some of them for another day, but look up for sure scarcity as it relates to financing, and psychologically how that acts as a motivating trigger for you to draw capital into your opportunity. It's quite a dance, there's no question about it, but you're fully capable of doing it. Even if you're just cold, sitting there cold right now going, okay, you're sitting back in your chair and you're saying, what am I supposed to do here? I need to raise some money. It's okay. You can absolutely set this up and trigger this type of activity, and you can do it from scratch. So keep that in mind. It's critical, I'd suggest to you, and really, really important. And I think if you look around and you think about it, those that you find aren't able to raise capital are really not triggering that element. And I think I would suggest to you it's pretty consistent. So keep that in mind. Here's some bonuses that I think are important, because a lot of people don't know how to close. So they walk into a room, I've seen this, they walk in and they go, I'd love for somebody to finance me. And they walk into one meeting with one investment group and they go, right, like, do you love me? Look, I've told you my story, like, can you tell me you're going to give me $1 million now? I mean, it's just not, this is not how it works, especially if they've met you for the first time. These groups, and all groups that are legit, do what we call due diligence. And due diligence is the process of digging into the nuts and bolts of a group, a company, the people, their track records. Does the president have a criminal record? Is this his real name? Does the company's product stand up? What are the reviews of the company or product? Do the financials make sense? You can put whatever you want on a PowerPoint presentation and walk it in, and bring in the marching band and the trumpets and you know, dress in your finest bow tie or whatever you like to dress in. But none of that matters if the nuts and the bolts of what you're telling people doesn't stand up. And if it does stand up, you know, you're going to get a lot farther. You're going to get that traction. So, so how to close? Okay, the lead order. Okay, so who's your lead order? We call it on the street, so to speak. We call it breaking the back of the deal. I need to raise $1 million. Well, if I'm going around sourcing $5,000 participants for my company, that's going to take a while. Do the math. $1 million times, or sorry, divided by $5,000, and I'll tell you how many people I need to, you know, for lack of a better word, convince, but let's say attract or close on their participation in my company or project. So a lead order goes a long way. Who is the backstopping group? Who is the big group that says, you know what, you need $1 million, we're in for $500,000. Okay, and why is a lead order important? Because once you've got a lead order, it's much easier to go to everybody else. And it segues right into circling the wagons, which is my next tip. Okay, this is the trick: is the soft order versus the hard order. Okay, first off, you really want that lead order, so you start going around and you're talking to these different groups. All your materials are together. Things make sense. You're in the right space. You've targeted your audience. You've made respectful overtures with your materials to connect for a meeting or an introduction of what you're looking to do. And these groups are taking the meetings because that's what they do. They're looking for companies just like you to invest in, on the promise that they're going to grow. Your companies are that is, and their investments will grow. So they're not in the building company business in most respects. They're in the financing company business, so they do need you. This is the role they play, and so you're there. All is well. Initially, you're sourcing that lead order. Now, how do you get somebody to commit to an order? Well, some people go, okay, you know, thanks, Chad. Sounds good. Nice talking to you. I'll let you know, right? And that's all well and good. The question needs to be, do you feel, there's a couple questions, but let's say you have to ask the questions. Do you feel this is an opportunity that's suitable for your group? Yes, I do. No, I don't. No, I don't. Great. Have a great day. I'll keep in touch and let you know if anything else comes up, or there's some new project I'm working on that, you know, may be a fit for you. Yes, we do think it's suitable. Great. If all things check out for you in your due diligence and your internal processes, what type of size do you think you would be interested in participating in this financing for? So you want $1 million, okay? How much would you participate for? Well, you know what? We'd be interested in participating for $200,000 if everything checks out and all things being equal. Great, sounds good. Or, well, we're not sure if we'd participate yet. Usually we participate between maybe $100,000 and $500,000 in an investment. Okay, interesting. What other conditions, other than what we've discussed, would you be interested in sharing, or could you share, that would be required for you to make a commitment in this financing? And some will tell you, though they won't always, that they don't want to be alone. There's no fund that often wants to be the only one at the party, saying, hey, we came in as the only investor for $1 million worth of this company. Because depending what it is, what you're doing, I mean, the valuation, that might become a controlling interest. They don't want to own the whole company necessarily. They want to be a part of owning the whole company. And if you're a public company, if you invest too much, then you're working into like you're working into an over 19.9% issue, in which case, you're in a controlling position, and trading the stock that you own can become quite a challenge. So, as it relates to that, keep that in mind. they don't want to be alone. So, in what respect does the group you're working with need other participants to participate with you on the financing? Super important. Let's get to the next step. To make this work, you need to adapt for feedback. So as you're in the room, if a group is providing you feedback on your offering and whether this is working or not, you really need to consider whether it is something they're interested in or not, based on their feedback. If they're saying, listen, this is all really well and good, but your valuation is out of whack, your branding seems to be a little bit off, your sales strategy needs some work, this, that, or the other thing. Get them to an if then, or an if A then B concept. Okay, so or an if A then B position. So, hey, if you make the changes to this sales strategy, and we have some ideas, and you implement these ideas, right, we will then finance you for $500,000. Okay. And if you are not paying attention and you do not understand what that means, and you are offended because you came up with the sales strategy, okay, please excuse yourself from that meeting, go to the bathroom, throw some water on your face, take a deep breath, and come back, and then accept what they have to say. I mean, just surely, if it makes sense, by all means. But be adaptable. Everyone's going to have a wish list on what they'd like to see. But if that wish list is tied to the investment you require, and the suitability of the potential investment partner is a match for what you're doing, then there's no reason you shouldn't accept. But the reason that some of the stuff doesn't get done is because people go, well, I don't believe that feedback, and what does this guy know, and blah, 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 and they blow it, right? Ego blows the opportunity to create a real promising partnership. And for all groups, there is an if A then B. Let's go up a step on the if A then B consideration here. What if they don't have any feedback, but you've asked them if they want to put an order in, and they say, well, I'm not sure, I don't know, like, you know, and they're not usually that washy. Some of them will just say, this doesn't work for us, peace. But they haven't provided an order, and they're kind of like, well, we'll take a closer look at it. Then you can ask a good question. What would it take, ladies and gentlemen, what would it take for you to participate in this company? Well, it would take X, Y, and Z to occur. Interesting. Okay, we'll give this some thought and we'll come back to you. Or you could put it the other way. Ladies and gentlemen, if we got George Clooney to step in this financing because Jimmy over here, it's his uncle's brother's third cousin or something, and George, you know, has told him that he likes stuff like we're doing, so we're going to chat with him. If George Clooney came in for $500,000 as an endorsement, or George Clooney was going to come on as a brand ambassador or an evangelist for our product and service, would you be interested? Oh, that's interesting. Or, hey, if you guys usually come in for, let's say, $200,000, if we had $800,000 committed by other parties, this is a real trick, so pay attention here. If we had $800,000 committed around the horn from other parties, would you be willing to invest the final $200,000? And you know what? More often than not, they'd say, you know what? We'd take a serious look at that. Why? Because they're not alone, because they're the last order, because they don't have to worry about being the first order. Nobody wants to be first. So the trick is circling the wagons, is you get all these different groups. Remember, that's just one meeting. So you're going to do a dozen, you're going to do 20, you're going to do more of these meetings depending on how hot your story is. Point is, circle the wagons. It's called soft circling. So soft circle the wagons and ask this question to each of them. ABC fund. If we raised $800,000 everywhere else, right, with good parties, and we have some interest in other areas, and this is all legit because you do, of course you do, you're not lying to anybody, would you be interested in participating for the $200 on the back end? Yes, I would. Now what happens if you walk around soft circling and you ask everybody that question and everybody says yes? Well, I would be happy to put the last 200 in. Well, so now you've met, let's go, 1 million, right? 1 million divided by 200,000. So that's 5 different groups. Now you've asked, let's say 10 groups, 5 of them said no. They're what you call wood, not being disrespectful, but you know, some of these are guys that just don't fit, or they're just kicking tires, or they just wanted to take the meeting to show they're doing some work or whatever. But let's say you got 5 groups and you've asked them all this question and they all say, yeah, you know what, if you've raised the other 800, we'll be the last 2. Cool. Well, the trick is in the financing closing, it all closes at the same time. So there is no first and there is no last. The only difference is there is a first and a last group to commit. But in soft circling, which is the first step, nobody's committed. They're just making a representation that says, yeah, that profile looks good. So you go around, you ask everyone you're dealing with that same question, okay? And they come back and they go, yeah, okay, sounds good. So now, think about that. You've asked those 5 groups, they've all said the same thing. Who's first, who's last, it doesn't matter, but they are all essentially the last order. So you can go back to each group and say, guess what? I've raised the other 800. I've raised the other 800. I've raised the other 800. And everybody says, okay, cool. And they go, who's all playing? And then you go, look, these guys said they'll come in if everyone else comes in. These guys said they'll come in if everyone else comes in. These guys, these guys, these guys. And sometimes these groups know each other. And occasionally they'll be like, oh, I hate that group or whatever. They've had some bad business in the past. It doesn't matter. Just check it and just say, look, this is unique to us. We're the leaders here. Our company's rock and roll. It's a different story. We're going to blaze through. And what you do is you tie these groups together, okay? Consider it wrangling. No disrespect. It's a bit of cattle herding. But you need leadership. You need someone with experience. But now you have a bit of experience because I'm explaining you how to do this. Is you pull everybody together. Yes, Jimmy, I got you. Yes, Julie, we got you. Boom, you're in. Boom, you're in. Sub-agreements, right? Subscription agreements for their participation, their financing go out to everybody. Boom, boom, boom. Right? We need these back by Friday, 4 o'clock. Great. Bang, bang, bang. Right? You can go yourself, knock on the door if you have to in your close, or at least expect them back. If one doesn't come in, you know, follow up, be aggressive, get it. Close this thing, show leadership, step into your fire and you're real like, rah, you know, like let's go. Be respectful, but keep that energy up and rock this thing to close with your lawyer for sure. Here's the docs, here's the checks, money's in the bank. Thank you very much. Shake hands with everybody. Prepare your press release. Make your announcement that you've raised $1 million, and you know, if you're allowed to, disclose who's participating, and you know, everybody will high five, feel good about it. It's a huge accomplishment to be able to draw in capital for your startup project. It's art, it's magic, it's all kinds of the stuff. It's exciting, it's nerve-wracking, it's gut-wrenching, it's challenging, it's big stuff. So so be proud of it when you get there. These are some tricks to do it, and I think they'll serve you well. I think if you're sitting there trying to figure out how you're doing this, this should help. This should be a nice little toolkit for you to get going. That's why I'm sharing it. So let me know if you have any questions, comments. They're all welcome here. Connect with me on social media, my email list. Have a look through McMillan Strategies. Appreciate the time you've spent with me today, for sure. I wish you the best of luck on your journey and getting your startup projects financed. This is a revolution in entrepreneurship for sure. Entrepreneurs have never been as empowered, I believe, as they are today. And these startup projects, the real good ones, definitely need to get off the ground and help improve all kinds of different social issues and challenges we're facing right across the globe. So be proud in your mission, stand tall, get in there, be confident, use some of these techniques, and I look forward to hearing about how they've served you. We'll talk to you soon.